Welcome back, nobles and others who are interested in classical literature. Today we're going to talk about maybe a book that some of you read when you were children, or maybe you've seen the movie even. It's called Journey to the Center of Earth, and it's written by Jules Verne. This book was first published 1864, and it's actually a French work because Jules Verne is from France. The Journey to the Center of the Earth is also the second book in a series that's called Voyages Extraordinaires, and these books were published between 1863 and 1910. These books are all combined with scientific facts and adventure fiction, which is also what laid the groundwork for the very popular genre that we have today called science fiction. I myself would not consider these books to be the typical science fiction that we may see in books today, but I do see where it came from, which is very interesting. I would say that these books are more laid to the adventure fiction than anything else, but we do have a lot of scientific talk in this one, and a lot of talk about rocks. Rocks and minerals are very popular in this book, particularly. I have not read the other books in the series, Voyages and Extraordinaires by Jules Verne, so this was my first book, and I can say for a fact that I understood the characters, even though it's the same characters in all the books. So I feel like you don't have to read the books in any order, but I may be wrong in that considering I have not looked into the other books. They are on my reading list, so at some point I will most likely read them. But today I picked this one because I thought it sounded interesting with a journey to the center of Earth. It piqued my interest, so to speak. I'm going to lay it out like I'm going to talk about the summary of the book. I'm going to talk about some specifics through all the three characters that we have in this book. And then I'm going to talk about my experience reading the book and some questions that I do have about the book. Usually when I do these videos, I usually also have an analysis of the book, but I feel like this book is very straightforward and it's not a lot of analyzing I can do because it's not that deep, if you know what I mean. Something I can say about this book is around this time in Europe, the 19th century, there was like a huge public interest in like science of the geology and paleontology and the evolution of time, but also the theory was going around a lot in Europe that the earth was actually hollow. So to me, it makes a lot of sense that this book became so big at that time and a lot of people wanted to read it. I also read somewhere that it was so big when it came out that they would rush translations. So in the beginning of the few years, there was like a lot of translations out there that wasn't that good. You can almost say like, Google Translate translations, because people just wanted to like spit out this to the public and have everyone read this book, which is a good sign because that means everyone was enjoying the book and everyone liked the book. But it's also very interesting that at that time, 1864, they couldn't wait a few months for it to be a proper translation. And people read it and there was a lot of errors and a lot of people did not understand it when they read them because it didn't make sense because the translation was that bad, which is an interesting fact to this book. Other than that, when it comes to the summary, I can't really see anything deep about it, so I can't really analyze it that much, but maybe it's because the story went over my head. But to me it was more an adventure book that was just very straightforward. When I'm doing this summary, I will still do a lot of spoilers that I usually do in these videos about my classic work. So I'm going to spoil this story, so if you haven't read the story and you're very interested in reading the story first, I would suggest that you read the story first and you experience the story first, and then you can come back and you can listen to the summary afterhand and what I thought about it. Yes. So for the summary, we follow a guy called Otto. He's a scientist and he's trying to decipher an Icelandic text that he found. Axel, who is his nephew, finds the translation, and it turns out that it's a text for like a map to find the center of the earth. We find out that the center of the earth, it has an entrance in Iceland in a crater, a volcanic crater. So Axel and Otto, they do not hesitate any moments, but they leave directly for Iceland, where they meet their guide called Hans. And these three are our only characters, so to speak. So we're going to only have the scientist Otto, we have the nephew Axel, and we have the Icelandic guide Hans. And Hans do not speak any other language than Icelandic, which Otto knows, but Axel, the nephew, does not know Icelandic, so he cannot speak to Hans directly. And the entire story is written from the nephew Axel's point of view, and he is the narrator of the story. Anyway, the three people decides to find the crater and find the entrance to the center of the earth. And they encounter really bad weather, but still Hans is a really good guide and he keeps them safe, and they get to the crater where they lower themselves with rope all the way down. When they get into the crater, they start to experience all the terrors, but also the cool wonders that they can find down there. They have not gone deep enough to go to the center of the earth, but they have gone a little bit. I think someone did a mathematic I read somewhere someone said that they only went like 4% down and not more. But the trio decides that they need to find the entrance, because this crater just took them a while down, but they need to find the next entrance to go down. So they decide to go and look around, and they find everything from a natural gas room, like a room full of natural gas, underwater rivers. They also find a human-like creature, and they find very vast caves where they can speak to each other, even though they are very, very far apart. And they also find dinosaurs. And that was like the thing I was very mostly looking forward to. I was looking forward to the dinosaurs, because I was promised dinosaurs. Then after they find all these things, they look at all these things, they look at rocks, they talk about rocks a lot, and minerals. They finally find the giant place where you actually go to the center of Earth, and it's a giant pit just all the way down. And the trio realizes that they can't really go down if they don't want to die, and they don't know where this giant pit leads to more than to the center of Earth, but they can't really know, is it just a straightforward down, and what is there, can we get up after we go there? So they decide not to go there, but as an accident, when they also find this big pit, they accidentally trigger a big flood, which swoops them away and takes them far, 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 far away from Iceland, and they get like spit out in Italy in another volcanic crater. But they all survive and everything is fine and dandy about it. And that's kind of the end of it. So it's like they find this big big piece of paper on Icelandic, who tells them to go to Iceland to find this passage to the center of Earth. They go a little bit down in Earth through a crater. They see a lot of things, like a human-like person living there, dinosaurs who's battling each other, natural gases, and a lot of rocks. They talk about a lot of rocks. I'm sorry I'm saying that a lot, but like I'm going to that point later on when I'm talking about my own experience. They see all these things, and then they finally actually finds the entrance to the center of Earth, and swoop, gets swooped away from a big flood, but they survive and they get spit out in Italy, roughly, and that's the end of the story. Interesting story indeed. To talk about the characters and the characters themselves, we have Otto, who is, to be honest, I didn't like any of the characters. Maybe I like Hans actually. Otto is probably the one I liked the least. He is super driven, which is cool. You know, he's a famous scientist and everyone knows about him, and he has a really great mind. But he also makes a lot of rash decisions. A lot of rash decisions that I myself do not understand. I mean, if you're that smart, you should be smart all the time, not just in your field of expertise, but you should be like at least smart on a smart level to keep yourself alive, kind of smart. And what I mean about that is there's like one instance where Otto tells them that they don't need to bring water with them because he's 100% certain that they will find fresh water where they're going. And I find that very, very hard to believe that you don't know. Nobody have been down to this crater. Nobody have been there as they know of. But he's 100% sure there's going to be water down there. So they don't bring any water. But they do bring gin, I think. They bring alcohol, which apparently is very, very important. But they don't bring any water. And, you know, as a human being, you need water to survive. And he's not just like, it's not only his own life that he's jeopardizing, but it's also like Hans, the Icelandic guide, but also his nephew. Like, are you okay with that? Are you okay with like jeopardizing people's lives? But then again, like, he's very, very arrogant and he's always right, and everything he says is just that way. Which kind of makes sense that he would jeopardize everyone's life, and he does these rash decisions believing he is right because he could never be wrong. But it makes him so unlikable and so ew, you know? But that's cool, I guess. He's very driven and stuff. Then we have Alex. Alex is he's also very, very smart, just like Otto. He is, but he's not as rash. He's more critical in his thinking, and he questions Otto a lot. And Alex is more like, he's more reserved, and he doesn't really share maybe the brave traits, because it makes like Otto, because he does these rash decisions, it makes him a little bit more brave, and he just jumps into situations, which in my mind does not make sense. If you're a smart scientific guy, you don't jump into like situations where you don't know the outcome of. But maybe that's my being stereotypical of smart people. But Alex gives me more of that stereotypical scientific guy that that I think of, you know, because he is smart, but he's not rash. He's more critical in his thinking, and he's reserved, and he doesn't do things he doesn't know where them will end. But it also makes him into a coward, which is his biggest negativity in this book. Then we have Hans the guide, who's Icelandic. He's very, very faithful. He's said to be a very ordinary man. That is also a guy that leads the other two to the place where they want to go. But he's like a rugged man, and he provides the physical capabilities to make the journey possible. Something that I'm questioning about Hans is he's never being explained where they're going, why they're going there, or anything. He's just getting money, and he's like, oh, I'm going to be your guide. And then he does everything Otto tells him to do, and he never questions anything, even if he's on the brink of losing his life and they can't find their way out. He still does everything Otto tells him to do because Otto is paying him. Which to me is very, very concerning and weird that Hans would put his life into this unknown man's hands, who is also very rash in his decisions and does not bring water for them when they're going down. And it's like Hans, he's so almost like naive, you know? He's very naive, but like, sure, he's a very good guide and he leads them where they want to go, and then just does everything Otto tells him to do, which is commendable, I think. But it's also a bit weird. I question Hans a lot, but I also think like we don't get much of Hans' point of view, because like I said before, Hans is Icelandic and he does not know any other language than Icelandic. So when he speaks Icelandic, and the only times that we do get a glimpse of him, it's through Otto's translations. And as we all know, translations, you know, the meaning behind it can be lost in translations. But I do think it's very, very interesting, because I have never read a book that has that language barrier, and I find that very, very interesting. So when I read it, I was like, this is interesting. I wonder if they're going to do something more with it. You know, they have this big issue about this guide who leads them somewhere, and the narrator cannot communicate with this guide, and everything he gets to know is through Otto, who just does a little bit whatever he wants to do, and because, you know, in the end he's always right. Which is very interesting. Another thing I also thought about when I read this book was Otto and Axel they're supposed to be like, you know, science people. They don't do physical training at all. They sit in their laboratory or, you know, study room, and they study rocks. I will come back to that with the rocks, but they study rocks and minerals, and they study books, and they read a lot, and they have lessons in front of other scientists and stuff. Like, they are not very physical, athletic people, and it's being told in the book they're not very athletic, but they are more like brain smart. But still, the first incline that they're doing in the first crater is supposed to be 10-hour rope climbing, or rope declining, because I'm guessing they're lowering themselves down into the crater. But it's still like 10 hours of them needing to hold themselves. I have never done this myself, but I'm guessing it's kind of straining on your muscles. And for doing it for 10 hours and needing to, like, you know, tense your muscles and everything, and they did no exercise before this, no training before this. They just like, you know, oh, we are smart people and we can do this. Hans, on the other hand, they tell, you know, when they're describing Hans, they describe him as this physical, athletic guy, and he's the reason that they can do this journey, because, you know, he does all the physical labor in the journey, because Axel and Otto is just there because of their brains, and they're going to look at all the stuff and all the wonders that they encounter. But all three of them still had to, like, incline themselves with rope for 10 hours. So it wasn't just Hans needing to do it, which is interesting, you know, but they never talk about this. And maybe maybe it's because, you know, this book is a little bit directed more for kids and teens, and they did not feel like, you know, that was an important thing to add. But I would have known more. I would have wanted to know more, like how they could do that, because I don't think I could do that for more than like 20-30 minutes. And I think I'm pretty strong, you know. Sure, I'm a book nerd, but you know, I still have my muscles, you know. But yeah, I think that was like the 3 things that I thought was weird about the book. The risking everyone's life for not bringing the water, the 10-hour rope climbing without any prior workout before, but also the language barrier was really, really interesting to me, and I would have wanted to know more. And I felt like Hans was my favorite character, and I don't know if it's because he was not described much and he was not talked about that much, so he was like a big mystery. He was just there guiding the people, and I just feel like he was described as this really strong Icelandic Viking who did all the physical labor so they could do the journey. But, you know, he would never say no to Otto because Otto was paying him and he would do anything for money. And I feel like there must be some more depth to that man than just, okay, Mr. Paying Man, I do whatever you say as long as you pay me money, you know? But it was interesting. My thoughts on the book was, to come back to why I'm saying there was a lot of talk about rocks, is because Otto is a scientist for geology and paleontology, I think it's pronounced, and that's basically information on stones and minerals and stuff like that. And as soon as he sees a stone or like a rock that seems rather interesting to him, he will speak about that for ages. And sometimes, you know, it got a little bit boring reading about all these paragraphs about a rock, because after a while you're like, okay, I get it, you're into rocks, man. But like, I'm not into rocks, and you will probably not get me into rocks. I'm pretty over this rock talk, you know. Can we move along? And then we actually come to really, really interesting parts. You know, you have dinosaurs who's battling each other, and then you see this human creature. You know, it looks like a human creature, and it's all very far away in this big place that they are at. But it's like Otto see this, and they're like, oh my god, that looks like a human. Let's not go there, because, you know, it can get very violent. So let's go the other way. So they decide to go right instead of going left, and because they don't want to encounter this human-like creature because it could be violent. So they decide to go another direction, and that's all we get. And it's like less than a page. And I feel like, wouldn't that be the most interesting thing to expand on? But at the same time, like I said in the beginning of the book, like, this book came out at the same time as geology was really, really popular, paleontology was really popular, evolution of time was kind of popular as well. But the more interesting was, like, you know, the theory about the fact that Earth was hollow was like a big gossip thing in Europe in the 19th century. So it makes sense that they wrote this book, and that they had the focus on geology and paleontology and all that things, and talked about rocks, because that was what people were into and people was interested in. But for me, in this time of view, I'm not that interested in geology and paleontology, or rocks for that matter. I would have been more interested in reading about the dinosaurs and the human-like creature, and maybe having them encounter each other and see if have it been other people there before them, and was it only like one human creature, or was it like a big tribe to the left? I just feel like, you know, Like, we came to this big conclusion in this big vast cave, and you know, you see something really interesting to the left, and these scientists, technically geology and paleontology scientists who is into rocks, they see this big discovery of dinosaurs and human beings and everything to the left, and they're like, that looks dangerous, you know, let's go to the right instead. And instead of like discovering more and looking into it more, they just like, no, and they go to the other side. You know, I feel like I was bamboozled, because you know, the front page of my book, it's like only dinosaurs. Like, people talked about, like, you know, they would do this big discovery of a human, you know, and they will meet everything, and I was like, ooh, sci-fi to this, you know, to the fullest. And I feel like this book was more 3 dudes in a cave talking about rocks. And then for 1 page, they do see a couple of cool stuff, but they decide not to approach them and go to look for more rocks. I felt like that was more the book. I'm not saying it was bad, because it wasn't. It was also very straightforward. It was not very hard to understand the book, because you know, some classics can be really hard to understand, and you have to like struggle and be like, what does this mean? You will not have the issue with this one. This would be a great way to start reading classical books, because this is very easy to read and understand, because it's that straightforward. But I did not find it interesting enough. I've heard his other books do have more to them and more stuff happening than this book did. And I'm kind of looking forward to reading his other books and see, like, is there a difference, or are they written in kinda somewhat the same way? I do think they are written in the same way, because what I've heard, it is Otto, it's Axel, and then this mysterious guide who leads them to different places, and then they see stuff on their adventures. So I do think they're kinda very roughly looking the same way, but at the same time, I don't know, because I have not read the other books. But I am looking forward to reading the other books, and if I would have given this a rating, I would probably give it a 3 out of 5 stars, because I feel like it's okay. I was disappointed because I was not given what I thought I was going to get. I've seen a lot of reviews from other people who give it like 1 or 2 stars because they are very disappointed, because the book is called Journey to the Center of the Earth, and then they actually never reach the center of the Earth, which I fully understand, but it also did not bother me that much. The thing that bothered me more was probably, I felt like it was not adventurous enough for me. It felt like it was more like I said, 3 dudes in a cave talking about rocks. That's kinda the feeling I got more than, oh my god, look at all these incredible things that we actually discovered in this huge place that we actually got to. So I feel like it could have been more, so to speak. And yeah, I think that's my thoughts on the book in a bigger picture. Do I recommend people reading it? Yes. Do I recommend people starting with this when it comes to classical? Why not? It's an easy, you know, start for a classic book to start with. For example, it's easier to start with this one than maybe the other book that I talked about, like Monte Cristo, or maybe like Crime and Punishment is also a little bit harder to read. So, is it a good book? Yes. Is it a little bit childish? Yes. Would people enjoy it? Yes, I think so. Did I still think it was a little bit boring? Yes. Yes, I did. It was very so-so. Yes. Anyway, that's my rambling on this book, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I gave you somewhat explaining what I thought about the book and somewhat a little bit of summary, but also a little bit facts about the book back in the day. And maybe I gave you a little bit inspiration to what to read next. And comment down below what you think about it. Have you read it? Do you want to read it? And I will see you next time. Bye!